Good morning, everybody. If you haven't seen this video, link is in the description, go watch this video. This is a good little mashup of Justin Trudeau throwing people under the bus, and it's well done. Thank you, Steeper33. Good work. And I don't want to show it here because I don't want to steal your views, but go check it out. It's fantastic. Give it a retweet and a like. It's wonderful. Nathan Cullen says, quote, "Can a Liberal supporter explain how this fits into Sunny Ways politics? I'm not saying we can't point out differences, but doing the attack thing while claiming your opponents are divisive and negative seems duplicitous at best." And this is in response to Justin Trudeau test campaign attack that lump Andrew Scheer and Doug Ford with the alt-right. Right. You can't say we are going to have sunny ways and we're going to do politics about policy and on, our record. And those guys are going to try and malign us and call us names. Those alt-right racists. It doesn't make any sense. It's ridiculous. It is patently stupid, just like, Mr. Trudeau. And here is Senator Leo Housakos. And I'm sorry, sir, I'm also Greek, but I haven't heard your name, so I can't say it. And anyway, he says, at Justin Trudeau, who compared my Greek immigrant parents to returning ISIS fighters, wants to lecture me on confronting racism. I'll take no lessons from you, sir. Where was your father when my grandfathers were fighting Nazis in World War II? And again, this is Liberals are treating racism like an electoral prop, and that's wrong. And it is wrong, and I think that it's going to spectacularly blow up in their faces. Any other party campaigning, is just going to say, listen, we don't think you're racist. The Liberals really do think you're racist. And here's 10 articles talking about how racist you are. You white Canadian, you natural-born Canadian, you. It's incredible, and it's insulting. And the specific fixation on white supremacy is concerning because there's no actual evidence of it. Here's a quick reminder on SNC-Lavalin and why the white supremacy alt-right thing has come up. They're trying to turn the page on SNC-Lavalin by saying Andrew Scheer's an alt-right extremist. He shared a stage with Faith Goldy, which isn't true. He didn't share a stage with Faith Goldy. They addressed the same crowd, which is totally different. They weren't on stage at the same time. I think they were at different sides of the Parliament building. The attack is so weak, a Kleenex could blow it over. Yeah, that's what I meant. And anyway, Ms. Philpott was ejected from caucus, along with Jody Wilson-Raybould, and Mr. Warnick, the chief of the Privy Council, and Mr. Butts, the former principal secretary to the Prime Minister, have all lost their jobs over this. This isn't a small deal, and now they're saying, it's Andrew Scheer's fault. He's alt-right. He's white supremacist racist. Yeah, sure. Here's a reminder about what this whole thing is about. Justin Trudeau's ineptitude.
After she was expelled from the Liberal caucus along with Jody Wilson-Raybould, Jane Philpott is fighting back to get back in.
I rise on a question of privilege concerning my recent expulsion and the expulsion of the member for Vancouver Granville from the Liberal caucus and a breach of the Parliament of Canada Act.
The former minister told the House of Commons the Prime Minister broke the law when he removed her and Wilson-Raybould because his MPs did not hold a required vote.
The Liberal caucus had 179 members, which means that at least 90 Liberal MPs would have been required to vote in favour of expulsion in a secret ballot.
There was a very...
So I think that it's interesting the way this is cut up. I wish they just let Ms. Philpott speak, and I couldn't find just Ms. Philpott's whole statement. So this is what I'm going with. Link is in the description. But I wanted to point this out. I was listening to Jordan Peterson the other day, listening to a chapter in one of the books or a podcast or something. And he said he stopped listening to the news 25 years ago or so when he realized that the politician was speaking in the background, but was muted, and the news personality was telling the viewer what the politician said. And I thought, that is really strange. And since hearing that, I've noticed it more, and I've heard it before, but I've noticed it more in the last couple of days that's been happening. And not to say that I'm guilty of that too. I try and let the politicians speak, and then I tell you what I think. And sometimes I paraphrase in order to clarify or help with the understanding of what they've said or what I believe they've said, because sometimes that's not clear. But I try and let them get their piece out so you can hear it and provide the links. So not to say that I'm different than all the rest, but I'm trying to differentiate and make sure that you've got the ability to make up your own mind, whereas that's not necessarily true with this one-way media. They're pushing a specific narrative. And what's that narrative? Well, here's Mr. Trudeau to tell you how dangerous free speech is and how we need to quash that free speech to keep our spaces and communities safe. And sometimes what happens online bleeds into the real world. Listen, I'll be really clear. I don't want anybody touching speech online or offline, period. I think full free speech up to inciting violence against somebody should be completely fine. And if you don't like what's being said, remove yourself from the room, remove yourself from the conversation if you're not mature enough to handle it. Having this idea of this constant moving hate speech that anybody can define, like Justin Trudeau, and this random alt-right ridiculousness, yet you cannot mention the likes of ISIS, Hezbollah, Muslim Brotherhood, or any of the other, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, any of the other groups of people who have said we are trying to attack the West. And look at what's happening in London and look at what's happening in Paris. We're not allowed to talk about that, but some random white supremacy is the biggest threat that Mr. Trudeau wants to quash free speech in order to keep people safe. You're lying, sir. You're a liar and no one believes you. Here's Justin Trudeau for 37 seconds of trying to convince you why he should be in charge of defining what hate speech is on social media. Do you want Justin Trudeau intervening to quash people you disagree with, or maybe you agree with? Who knows? Because you're never going to see what they think.
I think we've seen that the impact that social media, particularly around hate speech, around intolerance, around incitement to violence, is a real problem in our communities. We need to always walk that careful balance between respecting rights to free expression and free speech and keeping our communities safe. And unfortunately, what happens in the virtual world sometimes spills over into the real world. And I think it's really important that social media companies understand their responsibility to shape and to ensure that our communities stay safe for everyone.
Yeah, I don't I don't think Facebook has a moral leg to stand on, nor Twitter, nor anybody else. From what I've seen, they quite happily allow lots of terrorist cells full activity on their feeds, but if you have a conservative or anti-globalist view, you are shut down and vilified in your news feeds, etc., etc., etc. I don't trust them. I don't trust him. And this push on keeping people safe and protecting you from speech is a lie, is false. They're not protecting you from anything. They're moving to limit speech into a smaller window and vast debate within that window, but anybody outside of that window gets maligned, removed, and it's not acceptable in a free democratic country. It's not, period. If you don't like the speech, you have the right to remove yourself. You have personal responsibility to remove yourself, but you don't have the right to shut down that speech in order to make you continue to feel safe. Sorry about your luck. Welcome to adult land. Put your big boy pants on, okay? Or big girl pants on, one or the other. Global News is reporting, quote, Trudeau visits Sikh temple in Vancouver after government removes reference to Sikh extremism. I'll back this up a little bit. In 2018, there was a terrorism report released. The number one threat, of course, was alt-right. Yeah, believe that or not. I don't, by the way. And I've got a link to the report here as well if you're interested in it. But they had Sikh separatism as part of the threats, and they changed it to establish. Here, I'll show you. They changed it to establish extremists who support violent means to establish an independent state within India. So they went back to the report. They edited the report. You can't find the other report now. I don't have a copy of the original. I'm sure that maybe there's a Wayback Machine. I should look. I'm not going to right now because I got to finish this video. But my point is, if the government itself is willing to edit history, the Ministry of Truth is happening right in front of your eyes. And if you don't know what the Ministry of Truth is, 1984 is a book you should read. But they're editing history in order to suit the narrative now. Oh, we're sorry about this, guys. We're sorry we mentioned that you have a separatist cell and they want a state within India. And those groups is a Sikh group. And anyway, here's the report. Global News says, his morning speech came just hours after the federal government agreed to remove a reference to Sikh extremism from a report on terrorism. The language was changed late Friday to remove any mention of religion, instead discussing the threat posed by extremists who support violent means to establish an independent state within India. The 2018 public report on the terrorism threat to Canada drew the ire of the Sikh community when it was released in December. For the first time, the report listed Sikh extremism as one of the top 5 extremist threats in Canada, although the objections were largely about the inclusion of Sikhs at all because of the report's lack of evidence to back it up. Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodall said he would at least ask for the review of the language the report used. He said entire religions shouldn't be equated with terrorism. Read that again. I'll read it again. He said entire religions shouldn't be equated with terrorism. I think that's interesting, Mr. Goodall. I think that's an interesting turn of phrase. And the fact that they had no evidence to back it up. Well, have a read of the right-wing extremism area in this 2018 report. Talk about no evidence to back it up. It's ridiculousness. And then compare it maybe with the Shia extremism section, where they name a bunch of groups, and some of them I named off the top. It's really interesting. This report is written in order to push one ideology and mention others, because if you released a report that didn't mention these things, then you would be, seen as a ridiculous shadow of a country that's protecting these clear terrorist groups that are recognized by many countries worldwide, right? But the fact that right-wing extremism is the first one, come on, guys, come on, get real. So back to, that's that one. Bill Tufts is reporting. I find it interesting. Yesterday morning, I said it's interesting that Justin Trudeau is aligning himself with Mr. Macron, who's the president of France. Mr. Macron is sending the army and police after protesters, largely political protesters, are expressing their displeasure with his government. And Trudeau said, "Oh yeah, man, me and Macron are buddy, and we're talking about ways in order to fight this hate and extremism." So here's Bill Tufts tweeting. Macron sends riot police to beat protesters, and clashes erupt in yellow vest protests as Macron prepares policy. ... We'll get to that in a minute. That's a Reuters article. Here's yesterday's tweet from Justin Trudeau. He says, "My thanks to the President Emmanuel Macron for his call today. We had a good conversation on how Canada and France can work together to fight hatred and extremism, and also talked about the jobs and opportunities that CETA is creating in both countries." I don't want this to happen in Canada. Let me underline that really clearly. I don't want it to happen in Canada. But if this is the way Trudeau wants to go, that would be very unfortunate. I think that would be very damaging to Canada. Reuters reporting, quote, "Clashes erupt in yellow vest protests as Macron prepares policy response." Yellow vest demonstrators clashed with riot police in the French city of Toulouse on Saturday evening, even as President Emmanuel Macron prepared a series of policy announcements aimed at quelling 22 consecutive weeks of anti-government protests. They're calling for his ouster. Nothing less of his ouster will stop this. And the fact that he is just sitting in office is similar to Trudeau's tone-deaf response on SNC, closing down any avenue of investigation and refusing to hear the fact that people are absolutely very angry with him. The memes tell a story, and we'll get into the Alberta election last. It's happening Tuesday, but I don't think we're going to find out who the winner of the election is for another 10 days. I've been asking how you fight that. How do you fight that? I think they're going to implement it in Canada, the Canada-wide election for October, and I don't know how you fight that, because MPs don't care. We can't get a straight investigation on SNC. How do we tell them how to run our elections, right? We can't get. It's a farcical at this point in time. Our government is not listening to us, and that's frustrating. Mr. Dave is tweeting, quote, "When I say orange, you say flesh. Orange. Orange." That didn't work, but it's all right. The memes tell a story, and the NDP are looking at an epic disaster unless they stuff some ballots between the 16th and the 26th. This is Vivian Cruz, and she's got a very interesting Twitter account, and I've got a link to that as well, Fair Questions. And this is an interesting story. This is probably a video in and of itself, but I'm going to just touch on it because it's instructive, or it informs the Alberta election. If Ms. Notley is quite happy to have the Alberta's oil landlocked, then that's an even bigger problem than most people know about. So Financial Post is reporting, quote, "Rachel Notley, the Rockefellers and Alberta's landlocked oil. Alberta's in the final days before an election, and the backbone industry of its economy is practically broken because all pipeline projects out of the province have been stalled or ended. This didn't happen for no reason. This was planned and is precisely what a Rockefeller Brothers fund campaign was funded to bring about. The tar sands company has been running for more than a decade with financial help from the U.S., $870 million Rockefeller family philanthropic foundation. The goal of the campaign, as CBC reported in January, is to sabotage all pipeline projects that would export crude oil from Western Canada to lucrative overseas markets. Northern Gateway, Energy East, Keystone XL, Trans Mountain, and Line 3 have all been targeted. Most of the talk about this campaign is focused on how this activism chokes the oil industry, but tax documents indicate it also takes aim at natural gas. The reason Alberta needs pipelines is so that local producers aren't forced to sell only into the U.S. market, often at a steep discount. As it is, Alberta forfeits billions of dollars in lost royalties in revenue because there's no infrastructure for getting large volumes of oil to overseas markets where buyers pay more. Canadian producers are stuck selling into the United States for whatever they can get. But if Alberta is ever going to complete a new pipeline or extend an existing one, it needs a premier who has the courage and the ability to stand up to the Rockefellers and bring the tar sands campaign to an end. Until very recently, I was convinced that Premier Notley was sincere and committed to leading Canada into the global oil market, a daunting challenge for any politician because it means breaking the U.S. monopoly that has kept Canada over a barrel while benefiting U.S. interests to the tune of billions. But now, sad to say, it's clear to me that Notley will never do what is necessary for any Alberta pipeline project to go ahead. My opinion changed because of an email sent by Lead Now, an anti-pipeline activist, on April 1st and forwarded to me on April 3rd. By way of background, it bears mention that I've been working since July 2018 with Notley's government to provide information and assist her team in taking the necessary steps to break the pipeline gridlock. I scroll down. The email also explained what Progress Alberta is doing to defeat Jason Kenney and the United Conservative Party. Quote, we're holding texting parties every week in the lead up to the election where we text thousands of voters across the province to make sure they don't vote for Kenney's UCP. Contacted by phone and via Twitter on April 3rd, Kinney did not deny that the email forwarded by Lead Now was sent by him. Lead Now's executive director did not reply to tweets about this matter. Both Lead Now and Progress Alberta are partially funded, $62,000 US dollars in 2016-2017, $162,000 US dollars in 2013 to 2016, respectively, by the tar sands campaign, U.S. returns tax shows. At the same time, the Lead Now forwarded Kinney's emails to Lead Now supporters. Logan McIntosh, an executive director, noted that Lead Now would not be directly involved in the election, but suggested, with the election just 2 weeks away, will you sign up to join Progress Alberta's campaign to stop Kenney? By encouraging supporters to join Progress Alberta, Lead Now effectively joined the campaign against the UPC. Lead Now was created as part of the strategic incubation program of a Rockefeller-funded U.S. organization called the Online Progressive Engagement Network. Put another way, Rockefeller-supported organizations are helping to defeat the UCP, the only political party in the Alberta election that is committed to breaking the U.S. monopoly on Alberta's overseas oil exports. I scroll down. So far, I've not found any record of Notley saying anything against the brazen involvement in the election by groups whose explicit goal, landlocking Alberta's crude, is squarely against her province's economic interest. Notley is turning a blind eye, or she knew about it and doesn't care, or worse yet, she consents. Notley did address the activism against Alberta when she became premier in 2015, or so it seemed. Her climate leadership plan, introduced in November of that year, included everything activists had demanded. She increased the carbon tax and capped allowable emissions. The tar sands campaign called the plan a huge step forward, so hopes were high that Alberta would finally break the gridlock that kept Canada benched out of global energy markets. But no. Far from letting up, activism against Alberta pipelines raged on, and the U.S. funding continued. Rockefeller's most recent payment on record was $200,000 in May of 2018 to New Venture Fund, based in Washington, D.C. New Venture has funded at least 10 Canadian environmental groups involved in the tar sands campaign, including the Pembina Institute, Sierra Club BC, and Living's Ocean Society. I scroll down. Back in 2010, when the tar sands campaign was first reported in the Financial Post, there were virtually no information about it. The Rockefeller funding behind the campaign only came to light because of 3 little words, tar sands campaign, that I noticed quite unexpectedly in the course of other work. I soon realized that the same foundation that had brought the salmon farming industry to its knees were turning their attention to the Alberta oil. I scroll down quite a lot here. In hindsight, it's clear that Notley never really intended to challenge Rockefeller. If she had wanted to, she could have mobilized the government's lawyers or retained outside counsel and begun litigation in July 2018. How different things might have been had she done so. At the end of August 2018, the Federal Court of Appeal ruled in favor of a group of applicants seeking to stall Kinder Morgan's Trans Mountain pipeline project. What wasn't publicly known at the time is that the application had been funded, at least partially, as part of the tar sands campaign. We know this now because Living Oceans Society, one of the applicants to the Federal Court of Appeal, reported to the IRS in the U.S. tax returns that it spent at least $63,547 on this litigation. This information did not become publicly available to me until 11 days after the Federal Court of Appeal had ruled. The origin of the $63,547 is not publicly reported, but Living Oceans spent that amount in 2016 on litigation to stop the Trans Mountain Pipeline by intervening in its regulatory review and bringing judicial review proceedings. Quote, the society worked with nonprofit lawyers at Echo Justice to intervene in the regulatory review of the Kinder Morgan Trans Morgan Pipeline and Tanker Project. Living Oceans reported to the IRS. Echo Justice is the entity that brought the application to the Federal Court of Appeal. Echo Justice is also funded to participate in the tar sands campaign and has been paid $815,000 between 2009 and 2017 via San Francisco-based Tides Foundation for its participation in the tar sands campaign. Living Oceans also reported to the IRS that it, quote, instructs its lawyers to bring judicial review proceedings against both the recommendation report of the National Energy Board and the ultimate decision of the federal cabinet to approve the project. In other words, the application of the Federal Court of Appeal was funded as part of the tar sands campaign. This is not to say that the funding influenced the judge's ruling. Rather, the application to the court was funded as part of the tar sands campaign to landlock Alberta oil. In Judge Eleanor Dawson's ruling that paralyzed Trans Mountain Project in late August, she referred to the applications as not-for-profit organizations. No mention was made of that the three of the applicants had received at least $700,000 to stop the very project before her court. According to tax documents filed with the IRS, Tides Foundation funded the First Nation specifically to stop and oppose the Kinder Morgan Pipeline and Tanker Project. The First Nations band was the lead applicant to the Federal Court of Appeal, and Tides paid it at least $270,000 between 2009 and 2017 for the tar sands campaign. Information for the amount that may have been paid in 2018 is not yet publicly available. In ruling that the government needed to consult and do so meaningfully, the court instructed the government to consult with the very same First Nation that is being funded to stop the project by non-Canadian sources with broad interests that stand to benefit by stalling Trans Mountain Project. How different the court's ruling might have been, indeed the entire proceeding might have conducted differently if only Notley had initiated some form of legal action in July 2018 when she was provided solid footing on which to begin and urged to do so. At the very least, some form of legal action would have put on court record that the tar sands campaign explicitly funds activist groups, including First Nations, to landlock Canadian oil. And I wanted to point out, it's incredible the money and influence that went into NGOs, non-governmental organizations, First Nation bands, and environmental protesters, environmental activist groups. That's phase one of the project. And I've got a couple of things to show you with regards to that. Here's some graphs from Vivian Cruz. She said something I get asked about sometimes, funding from non-Canadian sources and Tides Canada versus Fraser Institute. And I've got a bigger graph here. But this isn't it. This isn't where they stop, right? These people are funding Tides, and this money flows to people. You wonder what these people are doing all day because they're paid. They're paid. They have money flowing to them from big companies to protest all day and to shut these things down and to bring legal action. They're using money to funnel it to stop our oil, Canadian oil, from getting to market. Why? Because it benefits financially U.S. oil markets. It benefits financially other oil markets that don't want that. And there's speculation about Venezuela oil, etc. as well. But this is follow the money. The money's right there. And here's another one. If you think that this ends at funding NGOs and funding First Nation bands and funding legal action, you're wrong. They're funding our politicians as well. BC Senator dodges money laundering questions. This isn't Alberta oil. This is parking money laundering in Vancouver real estate, thereby inflating the real estate market. Do you own property in Vancouver? Did you 10 years ago? Did you grow up in Vancouver? You don't live there now because the property's worth millions of dollars. So you cash out and you run, right? Because it's too expensive. How do you even afford the taxes on that? Right? Same thing's happening in Toronto. Money laundering being parked in real estate, laundered through casinos, and the government turning a blind eye. And oil, revenue for our country being landlocked by foreign investment, by foreign money, again with the same goal. Shut down Canadians' ability to continue to make money. Unbelievable. For our country, right? So frustrating. So thank you for watching, everybody. Sorry for no second video yesterday. It got to be 8 o'clock and then I found out there was a Leafs game and it was a whole thing. Anyway, thanks for watching. Check out the peoplespartyofcanada.ca. I keep pushing the peoplespartyofcanada.ca because Mr. Bernier is not a globalist. It appears that Mr. Scheer is. It appears that Mr. Trudeau is. And Mr. Scheer won't even speak the word globalist. He won't talk about it. So, I don't know. Maybe him and his buddy, Mr. Macron. Oh, I'm sorry. I meant Justin Trudeau and his buddy Macron. Right. I keep pushing Bernier because he's the only sane choice. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out the peoplespartyofcanada.ca. Have a wonderful day.